Hi, everyone. Welcome to Escapees webinars. I'm Jeannie Dees, the Escapees social media coordinator. And this week, we are discussing solo RVing with some of our Escapees members. Oh, here we go. Here's Sondi. Hi, Sondi. And Mark and Keri. All right, they're all here with us. Thank you. So glad you could all join us today. So, Keri, where are you currently?
I'm in Alaska. And no, I didn't RV up here. I flew up because I have family here I'm visiting for a couple months.
Great. Sounds nice. Sondi, where are you?
I am in the middle of Tornado Alley in Kansas at my
boy.
mom's house right now. Yeah.
Okay. And Mark, where are you?
I just left Livingston this weekend, and I'm currently in Kemah, Texas.
All right. Well, again, you guys, thank you so much for joining us. Let's go ahead and get started with some questions. What kind of RV do you have, Sondi? And why did you choose that RV?
I have a 24-foot Class C, and I chose it because I didn't know what I was doing. Honestly. Had I do it over again, I would do it differently.
And what would you get if you got it this time around, Sondi? What do you think would you buy?
I don't know what I would get. I just know what I would not get.
Okay.
Yeah. I know what I don't like now.
Yeah. How about you, Mark?
I am in a 36-foot bumper pull toy hauler, and I would consider this is my second one. I got on the road last year or the year before, and my other rig, I realized I couldn't turn the air conditioner on without putting the slide out, and it was just bad design. And so I started to list my next RV will, and so I can now turn on the air conditioner while I put the slide out. I go down the road, I get a phone call and I work, and it was important that I could pull over regardless of temperature and have a comfortable place to work. So that was kind of key. And I would consider downsizing now, but I would consider like a Class B pulling a toy hauler. I think the toy hauler is going to be a part no matter what.
Yeah. How about you, Keri? What kind of RV do you have, and why did you choose that one?
Well, I made mistakes, but unlike Sondi, I didn't decide to live with it. I had a Class C as well. It was my first one. I had a Toyota Dolphin. They're cool, but they don't run reliably sometimes. Then I had an A-liner, a pop-up trailer, which was not great in windstorms. I felt a little bit like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. It was swept away because it was so light. And so finally, for the last 2 years, I've been in a 23-foot custom-built Sprinter van that I designed and built mostly myself, except for the cabinets. I pay to get the cabinets done, guys. Don't trust your skills from learning from YouTube.
Yeah, I think I might have a little trouble with building cabinetry myself. It's just not one of my strong points. All right. As solo RVers, those of us who have someone with us to help out, break down, set up, dump the tanks, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, what do your travel days look like? How long does it take you? I mean, you're doing this all on your own. So, what does that look like for you? I mean, do you have to start way in advance and that kind of stuff? Or, is it just like, I'll just take my time, get everything done, no big deal. Mark, why don't we start with you?
I try real hard to keep everything in its place, but that doesn't always work out so well. But I typically don't hook up to water, sewer, or anything except on the day that I dump. So the day before I travel, or if I'm only if it's only been a week, I might go somewhere else for a week and then dump the next time. So that part of it isn't as bad because, I only do it once every 2 weeks, and I don't stay hooked up. I don't leave the hoses out. And that was a tip from my father, actually, because how do you know when you have a water leak? If you're hooked up to and you get a water leak, when the water just comes rushing out of the walls like his did. But if you only use the water tank, then you'll know when your water pump's running and you're not using the water. So it was a couple $1,000 lesson he learned that he passed on to me.
Yeah, definitely a good lesson. Wow. How about you, Keri?
I mean, mine's pretty easy. I think the biggest issue is collecting the stuff that I put outside. So with the van, I mean, sure, sometimes you forget to take your Berkey off counter and you get 1.5 gallons of water all over your floor, but you only make that mistake once. But other than that, it's really just taking in my floor mat, my chair from outside, and then I turn my swivel around and make sure I've collected all the dogs and then just head out. I mean, it's as little as 5 minutes, depending on how established my camp is, and at most an hour. But I mean, compared to the 1.5 hours, 2 hours it would take me with the trailer, it's nothing.
Yeah. I think a van would be a whole lot easier. And so, yeah, well, and Sondi, your rig isn't that big, but I just was wondering how long it would take you to get everything ready to go and set up and things like that, or breaking down too. How long does it take you?
I've never really timed it. I'm going to guess it probably takes an hour start to finish. The thing is with mine, I have the full slide. So everything, the storage completely changes when my slide goes in. And so it's a challenge, but I've gotten used to it.
Yeah, I've been around all of your rigs before, and when we're towing this fifth wheel, it just is such a huge vehicle. I can't imagine trying to do this on my own. I mean, I could do it on my own, but I just think it is so much easier if you have a smaller rig to be able to get things packed up, ready to go, or definitely have systems in place so that you can pack up and get ready to go easier. So
I was actually 15, 20
you
minutes.
mentioned like some of the challenges of how much time it might take for you to break down or set up. But what are some other kinds of challenges that you might face as a solo? Okay, I'm really impressed with that, Mark. That's great. That is awesome.
But it's 45 minutes now that I got a motorcycle and a bicycle. That
having systems down, I think, really, really helps out a lot. Are there any challenges that you face as RVers, as solo RVers, that you noticed, people like my husband Eric and I, we have the two of us to help take care of any issues that might arise, but any kinds of other challenges you face as a solo RVer that maybe okay.
I don't have anybody to get mad at me when I back into.
Keri, what about you? Any other challenges you have found that have come up that you've had to face as a solo RVer?
I think there's a little bit of latency there.
I think maybe
I can actually think of one.
Maybe didn't hear my question. Can everyone hear me okay still?
There's a delay.
Yeah, Jeannie, we can hear you. I think there's just latency.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we do have those challenges. I'm sorry.
I did have one specific example, which was which was last summer. I actually had a flat tire and I was really, really freaked out because I was in the middle of nowhere. And you know, it's not a big deal. I've changed my own tire. I even
Yeah,
had like roadside assist. It was no big deal. Someone came,
okay.
but the guy at roadside assist said, "Oh, this is a really high crime area. Don't leave your vehicles here." So I freaked out and made some really, like, I made some mistakes when I was like getting ready to go, and unfortunately it cost me my tow vehicles. I totaled the engine because I made an error in how I was like hooking up and everything. So I don't have a tow vehicle anymore. But I think had I had someone else who could sort of help maybe step back and be a little more rational, you know, it wouldn't have just been me and my emotional state that sort of allowed that to happen. I mean, mistakes happen. It's fine. Like, it's not fine. But at the same time, it was pretty, you know, even after 3 years on the road, it was pretty tough.
Yeah, that's not too bad after 3 years on the road. I'm sorry about your tow vehicle though. Sondi, have you come across any challenges, you know, other challenges that say, you know, multiple adult households like Eric and I have, you know, when we're with our RV that we probably wouldn't have, but you might, being a solo RVer?
Well, I don't have a navigator. I'm navigator and driver. And I don't have anybody to talk to, but then I don't have anybody to get mad at me either, other than myself. It'd be nice to have another set of ears and eyes. But
Yeah, I agree. There seems to be a pretty decent delay. So, you know, there are people talking about it in the chat. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that everybody is getting their chance to speak, and we don't have a lot of comments that are getting cut off by you. I think I might have cut Mark off that last time. Sorry about that, Mark.
No worries.
Okay, my next question, and we can start with you, Mark, is do you boondock on your own and stay in like commercial parking lots like Walmart? And do you have any advice for people who are thinking about doing that as a solo RVer?
I rarely stay at a Walmart or anything like that. I've done rest areas or truck stops, and it's very infrequent that I've got enough range on my truck. I'll just push it a little bit further and get to somewhere. But I typically don't do Walmarts. I'm more comfortable at a truck stop because, well, you just slip right in and you fit in. If I had a smaller rig, maybe I would feel different about that. I don't know. But I've got an onboard generator, which, again, was advice from someone else instead of the portables. And I've only needed it 3 times when I broke down, and I'm very glad for it. But that's about it, you know. Not much on a lot of.
I'm sorry, Mark, I missed that last part of your comment.
I see Ruth commented, yes, good luck with Harvest Host. I've stayed at a lot of Harvest Host. Oh, I was commenting on the comment in the chat because Ruth brought up Harvest Host, and I'd rather push it a little bit and stay at a Harvest Host than a Walmart.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Keri? Boondock on your own or stay in commercial parking lots like Walmart?
You think with a van I would, but I actually don't, because I work full time from my rig, and internet has to be is really important to me. I do a lot of research on where I'm going to land, and rely a lot on my circle of friends and be like, hey, I'm heading to Silverton, Colorado. Any spots you'd recommend, right? And so as part of that planning and traveling, I have to be sure that I just get there during the day, and scout. But most of the time, I'm actually traveling with people. So there's usually an established group of people in a given location. I'll just go join them. Social media is great for that. So I've actually only stayed at a Walmart once. So I really, unfortunately, don't have any pointers for staying at a Walmart or anything, but have stayed not in a Cracker Barrel, but I love parking like on the street near hotels, not in hotel parking lot, but kind of in the area where you might see semi trucks, because there tends to be slightly less traffic coming in and out than in the parking lot itself, and so it tends to be a bit quieter.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. What about you, Sondi? I know you and I have boondocked together before, but do you go out boondocking on your own or stay in commercial parking lots like Walmart? And do you have any advice or tips on others who are thinking about it?
Walmart or Cracker Barrel or places like that would be just like a quick overnight stop, last resort. I do boondock almost exclusively. So I feel safer boondocking alone than I do at a Walmart, actually. Yeah. Or in any city, actually. I feel safer boondocking than in the city.
Yeah, I've felt the same way before as well. Feel a lot safer boondocking than in cities. So how do you figure out where you're going to go? I mean, how do you decide where you're going to travel? I know Keri had mentioned meeting up with friends and using social media, but are there other apps that you use or anything like that you might use to find good places to stay?
I have a system.
Sondi, go ahead.
Go ahead, Keri.
Yeah, the latency latency's killing us. So I can actually reply in more detail in the chat because I'm watching it. But I've got I use Campendium a lot. I mean, their sell feature is like well worth the $20 subscription or whatever. Plus, Brian and Lee, and it goes, and it's a really great. It's a $20 donation per year, 100% worth it. Free roam has similar features, but I prefer to support the original Campendium. And I will make sure to get there early to test to make sure that I understand what the actual do speed tests to be sure that it's fine. But I pick a spot that I want. So let's say I want to go to I don't know, Silverton was the example I used earlier. I will reach out to friends that I know have been there before and say, hey, do you have any pins for me? And they'll share their location, or they'll share it and they'll say, yeah, I remember AT&T was pretty good here, right? But I'll also use Campendium. I will use satellite view. I'll use, so I'll go to like the Campendium spot, the pin, and then look around. I'll use satellite view on Google Maps to decide, well, maybe there's other spots that are not at the Campendium pin that are going to be as crowded. But more importantly, I want to know where the cell towers are. And so the closer you actually camp to those cell towers, the better the internet's going to be.
And Mark, do you use any of the same things that Keri does?
If you're asking me, then yes, a lot of the same places.
Great. Thank
As
you.
I'm driving around, as I talk to people, I got tired of them going, "Wait, what's that website you use? What's that website you use?" So I just wrote them all down. I let them take a picture of it, and then we can keep moving on, talk about other cool stuff. And I also work full time, so the cell signal, I use an app called Coverage. Check that also, but location to towers, as I have to have connectivity for work.
Mhm.
Past that, I flip a coin on where I go.
That's a fun way to travel. We did have a question from the chat, and people are wondering if any of you carry protection, like a firearm or taser, and then they want to know how do you deal with the legalities state by state when you're traveling.
I can answer that.
Mark, you want to start off on that one?
I do, and it'll be a very simple answer. They may not like it, but my answer is yes. That's it. No further disclosure at this
Okay.
This is my protection right here.
I have the same protection that Keri does.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to a couple of things that other people might want to know. And, these questions have to do with, do you prefer traveling solo or do you prefer traveling with friends? I know that Keri had mentioned traveling with friends and meeting up with friends. But, when you're going down the road, do you really prefer to travel by yourself, or do you prefer a caravan? Keri, why don't you go ahead and start us off with that one?
Oh, well, I've been traveling with a couple of people, but one person in particular, so much so that they call her my wife. We're not married. I'm yeah. But I really enjoy traveling with people. I started out full time in November 2.5 years ago, and I was going to go to the RTR. I was going to do all the things you're supposed to do as a van lifer, but I went to I met a couple people, like I met Amber from Interstellar Orchard separately, just kind of by happenstance. And they're like, go to the Escapers event. And I went to the courtside event for New Year's. And I'll tell you what, I never quit traveling with Escapers after that. I've got 100 new friends on Facebook. And I would say my closest friends are all RVers. So I am a little biased towards the Escapees and Xscapers organization. It's been really not only just changing my life on the road, but life-changing in general. But I like to travel with people. That's just how it's ended up, and I zero regrets about it.
What about you, Sondi?
In 3.5 years, I've traveled almost exclusively actually, with Xscapers. I prefer to travel with people or meet up with people. I'm rarely by myself.
And you, Mark?
Actually, mine, I guess, is more situational. It's not that I have a preference as much as I traveled for about 2 months, I think last year, with another escapee. And it was easier for me because I had somebody to pick where we were going because I didn't care. As long as I had cell service, I had to go somewhere. And if she did all the research, she's like, oh, this would be cool. And I'm like, is there cell service? And she's like, yeah. And then we'd go there. And it was fun traveling with somebody. But the situation is that I have to be able to work. So if I need to pull over and work for 3 hours and I'll just meet you there, then that's cool. If it's not cool, then we're probably not going to travel together. But it's not really a preference one way or the other, as much as it is situational. If it arises and we can hit the road together at the same time or meet up somewhere, awesome. And if it doesn't work out, I'll see you next time.
That's a great attitude, Mark. I really like it. Kind of fly by the seat of your pants. I kind of like that. It's kind of how we travel too. So it doesn't really sound like, any of you are lonely on the road. I mean, you may have started out that way, but, one of the questions that people ask as a solo RVer, or if they're starting to become a solo RVer, they wonder, how do you combat that loneliness while you're on the road? And I know that you'd mentioned Escapers and Escapees and meeting up with them, but you have any other tips for making friends on the road and trying to combat that loneliness that you may have every now and then? Keri, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I travel a lot with people, but I'm kind of an ambivert. I like to have my own time, and having, a van that I can close the door and close all the windows and just get away from people is a nice way to sort of avoid the chaos, especially at like Escapers events. But I've sort of been all over anyway. Like I moved from Alaska to Florida to New York to California and then in an RV. So I kind of have friends who are comfortable communicating like on the phone, the old-fashioned way. But I'll be honest, there are times when I get alone, and it's because I'm so used to being around people, and I do get lonely, but it's usually just an adjustment. I'm accustomed to having people around. It's just very different to be by myself, and I do thrive in that space after a little while. So give yourself time to adjust one way or another, because you will get used to it. But one really great way is, and this is not a sponsor, like Marco Polo is actually an app that I use a lot because it allows like video chat, but asynchronously. And so I'll send someone a Marco, and then they'll get a little notification that says, "Hey, Keri sent you a message." You just talk for a minute, in my case, sometimes 15, depending on what's going on and like what they said in their last Marco. And you just can go back and forth at your convenience. It's a little bit like texting, but a little more personal because it's like a little more, it's as close to face as you can get without actually like FaceTiming each other.
And what about you, Sondi?
I'm almost always with people. 99% of the time I'm with people. When I'm out on the road. So I don't know.
So there's really no loneliness if you're around all the people, that's kind of nice. And Mark, how do you combat loneliness on the road?
Well, I'm dogless right now. And before that, I talked to my dogs, and I realize I'm getting lonely when I start talking to the bugs or critters that make it into the trailer, and I have to release Mr. Fly and name him before I set it free. Then it's time like, well, I should probably go to the store or something, because I've never met a stranger. So, but yes, it does creep up on you. And when you start talking to the bugs that fly in, you realize maybe I should go find a human to, smack me around a little bit or something.
Yeah, I have to admit that, when we're on the road and, even though I have Eric and my dog Cricket with me, I do need to meet up with friends. So, even as a couple, we do get lonely sometimes, and looking at each other's faces all the time is not, it's not a bad thing, but it certainly, we get lonely for our friends and we want to hang out with our friends too. And so, yeah, like Mark said, when you start talking to the flies and the bugs and start talking to my dog more than my husband, I think maybe it's time to probably move on to the friends. give ourselves a little break and meet up with the friends. So I was wondering too, Escapees uses the word solo versus single RVers. And the reason that Escapees uses solo is because, if you use the word single, it has the connotation of like meaning you're available, available to date, or, just available to, to have a partner. So what are your thoughts on that, solo versus single? And have you come across any examples or experiences in your travel where, somebody kind of thought because you were a solo traveler, they thought that you might have been available for, dating or more? I mean, who knows? So, Keri, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thank you for level setting. I really appreciate you taking the time to say that, Jeannie. So I have had personal experience with it, and so I think that's emphasized that solo does not mean single. And even if I am single, I'm not at a solo event because I want to meet someone necessarily. It's not to say I'm not available or unavailable. No comment on that. But solo just means you travel alone. So people can they can be married and have his and hers rigs. I mean, we know plenty of people that are going in that direction even now. And they travel separately. They travel together as a couple or not. I mean, the latest trend has been to get a tow vehicle that you drive separately from like a big rig so you can have some time alone. But, we know some people who have recently that had a big fifth wheel and are now have a truck camper, and they sort of travel separately sometimes. And that just means that they are solos when they're not traveling together. So yeah, I think it is important to emphasize that especially as someone who is a solo woman, just because I'm alone doesn't necessarily mean that I'm looking for my next partner in crime. And if I am, it doesn't necessarily, I would like the chance to get to know you before we, I'd like to get to know you as a solo before we do anything else. So I'll leave it at that before I start blushing more. Mark, I'm pretty sure you had links on that.
Words matter, and I've never really thought of those are two separate words and have always been in my book. It's solo is a person traveling by themselves. It is irrelevant. Their love life is irrelevant at that point. They're just a person that's solo. If you say single, that means something to me. If you say solo, that means something different to me. I've never actually merged the two as one word, and I would advise other people not to do it as well. Just because you travel by yourself, it's like going to a restaurant, and if you see someone sitting by themselves, that does not mean they're single. It just means it's a person sitting by themselves eating. If you see a person by themselves in an RV, it doesn't mean they're single. It means it's a person by themselves in an RV. And I just never merged the two. It's always been, it's one person, it's a solo. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sondi, any thoughts on that? Solo versus single?
No, I agree with both of them.
Yeah.
Both Keri and Mark, I agree.
Yeah.
Well put.
Yeah, I thought it was explained very well by them both. I completely agree. I for one travel solo in a separate car, and my husband Eric drives the rig solo. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're looking for other partners. So we're just traveling solo. Here we go, and meet up with friends. And and so many people do the same thing, like Keri had mentioned. They have a separate truck and camper, and they travel together, they travel separately, happily married, and yet just like Mark said, it's just words. So solo means that you're just on your own at that point, and not necessarily looking for anything else other than here we go, traveling by ourselves. Just thinking of that experience of traveling on your own and traveling as a solo traveler, and thinking about say, for example, male experiences compared to female experiences, and when it comes to safety, I was wondering how we've talked about protection and having a dog and things like that, but do you feel unsafe, and you had mentioned before feeling unsafe in certain situations and not in others, but when you first started out, did you feel exceptionally unsafe as a woman, or do you just listen to your gut and go from there and decide what to do depending on that? Sondi, would you care to comment on that a little bit?
I haven't felt unsafe. And the good thing is if you're ever where you feel unsafe, you can remove yourself from the situation most of the time. But when I'm especially with escapers, I always feel safe.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question the way you wanted me to.
Oh no, you did. Yeah, you did. Thank you. And Keri, traveling as a solo woman, any thoughts on that? And as far as safety,
I wouldn't say that I've ever felt scared or afraid. I think that, especially if you watch a lot of YouTube videos, sometimes there can be some fear mongering in social media. But I will genuinely say that exercise and confidence building for me. I'm a pretty accomplished person individually, but you start solving problems, like you break down and you blow up your tow vehicle, and you get over it. It does help your confidence in the long run, fortunately. I probably have a bit of a false sense of security with my dog. He's loud and big, and he lets me know if there's anyone around. But I do also have other methods that I don't need to disclose in a public venue like this. I will say that trusting your gut is important. I don't, there's some tips that people give, like, leave that boots out, so it looks like there's two people. I've never felt like I'm in a situation where I need to do that. I do trust my gut. I have had several situations where I have arrived at a camp spot specifically, and I just didn't like the vibe. There's needles on the ground. It's a place that you don't want to spend time necessarily. And so an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? You just go out, you get there early to make sure that you can observe your surroundings, figure out who else is there, because sometimes there are people you don't want to camp near. Like, I don't want to camp near a bunch of weekenders who are shooting off their guns at 3 a.m. I mean, maybe some people want to spend their time doing that. That's not who I want to surround myself with. And so if there are people who are drinking a lot, they have beer cans all over, they're just things you look for in the campsite that tell me I don't want to camp there. It's not necessarily a matter of safety. It's not like I assume anything about those individuals, except for they're going to be inconsiderate at 3 a.m. sometimes. And I just go find another spot to camp.
Yeah. And Mark, has there ever been a time when you felt unsafe out boondocking, or just traveling on your own? I mean, I know I've specifically asked about women travelers. We always have that voice in the back of our mind about is this a safe place? And but I don't think that I've really spoken to men about that so much. I mean, have you actually felt unsafe in certain instances before?
Probably not like you would think. I'll give you a recent thing that happened out north of Quartzsite. something was going on outside. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew other people in the area. So I ended up taking precautions and getting me and some items out of my rig and into my truck so I could react and get involved if necessary. And it turns out it was a police chase out in the middle of the desert. And no, I was actually willing to put myself in the middle of it because I knew there was someone who happened to be a female escapee right on the other side of the hill, and I wanted to make sure she was all right. So, yes, I'm concerned, but not necessarily for myself.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I feel like if I'm, ever on my own, I'm going to go park next to you sometime because then I'll know you got my back. So, and there's really only been one time that I've felt unsafe. And my husband, Eric, and I both felt unsafe being around a particular person. We were boondocking, but that's one time. And let's see, we've been doing this for 6 years. So yeah, I would say that, trusting your gut and, just being there to help each other out is pretty important. And, making sure that you know what's around you, just always watching and always observing. So I think that really helps out a lot. We did have a comment that Tana had mentioned. She said she's been on the road only for a month and doesn't really have a group to travel with. And she's been in RV parks, but has signed up for the Escapade in Wyoming. And what she's noticed is that even when she's in RV parks, couples don't really reach out to her as a solo RVer. Have you noticed that, or has that been your experience? But now I'm going to go introduce myself when I get there because I don't want her to feel that way all the time. So, but Sondi, what about you? Have you noticed that at all?
Oh, people don't reach out to you in RV parks, just in general as a solo. It's my experience, but I've only stayed in an RV park a handful of times. The best way to meet people is to go to events, and then you can branch off and find out who your people are within Escapees or Xscapers, either one, and you'll find your people.
Yeah. Mark, how about you?
I'm kind of with part of what Sondi said, that I don't think in general, a lot of it depends on the RV park and where you are. There are people that want to talk to people and there are people that don't. And I don't know that it's necessarily solo perspective. It may be more age related for certain people, because I've seen some people that just looked at me like, I'm not talking to that kid. And I'm like, I'm almost 50 and I'm the kid. Okay. Got it. You know what? All I did was say hi to your dog, because I was tired of talking to the flies. But some people are out if they're outside, some people want to talk and some people don't. I don't think it's specific to solo as much as it's just situational.
Okay. Keri, have you had that experience where couples have not really reached out, or if you tried to reach out to couples, it wasn't as big?
Well, to be fair, I don't necessarily want couples reaching out to me, if you get my meaning. I have the exact same experience when I was, in RV parks. I'd like go to the dog park as an example, and I would just try to chat with people, and they were often kind of short, and I think that there is an age difference. I mean, the RV parks can trend older depending on where you are, or they can be full-time families. In which case, that is not kid friendly, and so I have to be very mindful of giving her space so that she doesn't, just so she doesn't isn't stressed out. But I found, and the pandemic, 2020 was a weird year, and a weird year also to go on the road because all the events were canceled. So I would say events are the best way to do it. seconding what Sondi was saying. Social media has worked really well for me. Like I said, I reached out to a couple of YouTubers that I had been following for a while. And so Amber is still a good friend of mine. Becky is still a good friend of mine. And I've met other people who happen to have YouTube channels that were my friends first through the community. I'm not a YouTuber, to be clear. I don't have anything to do with that. But I have found that social media, Instagram can be a great way, especially there's some women's groups on Facebook. I think Solo Women Van Life is more kind of in the RTR crowd. You know, and there's just different groups. So just find one that works for you, that you kind of like the vibe, you like the things that they're chatting about. If you're going to a place, search for that place on Instagram and see if there's anyone who has maybe recently been there. They can recommend places for you to go. You know, if you chat a little bit, like I said, solo women to solo women is a little bit less, there's probably less of a barrier there. But you know, they still may be reasonably cautious if they haven't chatted with you before. So look at social media like Facebook or Instagram as something to develop more long-term relationships where you spend for a while and then maybe you meet up, because you know, you don't invite a rando over to your house, but when you travel on the road, when you meet up, sometimes you have your house with you. So you kind of want to just be, you know, mindful of that weird caveat. But social media has been great for me.
Great. Well, now I'm going to bring up the topic that, you know, sometimes makes people blush a little bit, but how do you feel about dating as a solo RVer? And what has your experience been trying to date and RV at the same time? I mean, you know, to me, it seems like it would be kind of tough because, you know, trying to find somebody who has the same interests as you, which includes a big piece of your life, you live in your RV. So, you know, how has your experience been with that? And if you don't mind sharing, Mark, would you like to start off?
Dating is quite a challenge, in my opinion, because, you know, every day is potentially my last day in an area. And so you really limit the people or the pool that you might be available to be involved with. And so unless I don't travel as much, or it's a long distance relationship, or they travel or can travel, or I guess if I just stroke the check and they come get in mine and we just go, there's not many options past that. Although there's a restaurant that I go visit when I visit my mother, and the waitress there tells me that I'm her favorite boyfriend because I only come there 3 times a year. I give her money and then I leave. So, I mean, there's something to be said for the traveling, I guess. But it has been a challenge. And the other thing is, you know, you meet people within the club that are also single, but it's very scary because it's a big club but a small family, and I'm a little leery of crossing that line with somebody that potentially we have all the same friends. And so yeah, it's weird. It's like the most logical place is probably the scariest place for me.
That makes sense. Keri, have some thoughts on that?
Lots of thoughts. I'll try to be brief. I will say that I definitely agree with Matt or Mark, I'm sorry, or Willie. Mark, sometimes Willie. Mark, in that you don't want to date in the family or in your like tribe, because it can feel like if you break up, like there's drama, and like you don't want to rock the boat on that. So that can be tricky, because of really big community, but also really, really small at the same time. But I have dated, and what I will say is that I have met both romantically and as friends, like some of the most emotionally intelligent people. And it's just amazing what it will do for a person when they decide, I'm going to do something unconventional, like go live in an RV or travel in an RV, right? And when you take that kind of like control of your life, there's a level of authenticity and just people, they're happier. They're happy and bricks, like, and I'm not just saying that, like, for real, they are. And so it goes a long way. The only other thing I'll say that kind of complicates it is, like, you go from like date one to, like, basically living together because you travel, and that is actually where the complication is sometimes, because if their rig is much bigger than yours, sometimes they can't go places. And actually that was a deal for me. Like, I dated someone who has a really big rig, and that's not even, he had 44 foot or something like that. And then my rig is 23. And so I want to go places that, like, I want to go on those stupid back roads that he couldn't necessarily travel on. And so that was an awkward point when we were together. But anyway, I'll just say that just approach it as friends first. Like, get to know someone, chat. Like, it's not going to hurt to have a couple conversations before making a romantic gesture towards someone. That way you have a chance to kind of get to know each other, because there's in a way there's a lot more at stake, because one, you're in the same circle, but two, also if you travel, you kind of move in together. Like, you're living next to each other. And then you have to make a conscious decision to stop traveling together, right? And it's just, it kind of raises the stakes. I've heard that people say that, like, RVing time, either in a relationship or just in real life, is like, 1 week is like 2 months or something like that. So, like, you kind of go, it gets very serious very quickly because you're spending all your time together. And that can be good and it can be really bad. Yeah. I've seen it work out really, really well for some people, not so much for others. Go in with the understanding that when you do date on the road, it's going to be different.
Yeah. Well, I really thank all of you for your perspective on solo RVing. This has been a great chat, a great panel. We always are curious, how things go with you, and you've cleared up some things for us, us meaning, those of us who travel, with a partner all the time. So, again, thank you so much for your time. And that brings us to a close for this webinar. And I'm just going to say that if you have any questions, or if anybody else has any questions, we can pop them on here. But it seems like we got most of the questions answered that people wanted. And so we're about ready to come to a close. And again, thank you so much. It was great to see all of you. And I'm just going to say, before we close tonight, make sure to join us again each month. We have a webinar, and we also have a virtual campfire every month. And I wish everyone happy travels, safe travels, and we'll definitely see you down the road. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.